Usually, this is the operational side of
Are you
reporting.
People
so
skip past the next 20 minutes.
You know, no, but it is essential.
Hello and welcome to episode 161 of the Rockstar CMO effing Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm no rockstar, but on this weekly podcast, I chat with the true rockstars, my fabulous guests and chums that I've met on my journey from techie to CMO, sharing their marketing street knowledge in a show that Jason Falls described as a variety show for marketers. It's Saturday the 8th of April. It's a long Easter weekend holiday here. If Easter is your tradition, I hope you're having a great weekend and you are well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. This week in the marketing studio, Jeff Clark shares the next steps for setting up your marketing metrics. I go backstage with Courtney Lindau, Head of Practice for Web Analytics and Business Intelligence at Nimble Gravity, and I wind down the week with Robert Rose in the Rockstar CMO Virtual Bar. If you like the show, come say hello. We are Rockstar CMO on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'll include links to me, my guests, and all the things we talk about in the show notes on rockstarcmo.com, and we are proud members of the Marketing Podcast Network. Right, let's get started. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word. We'll be right back after this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment, the Marketing Studio with Jeff Clark, our weekly dose of marketing street knowledge from our resident Rockstar CMO strategy advisor and former Forrester research director.
Welcome, Ian. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you very much. Thank you for welcoming me to your studio.
Come on in. We'll be on the air. Actually, no, we're on the air right now.
We are.
Darn it.
Can't you see the little red lights on and everything? Yeah. How are you, mate?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you very much. And how's the weather in sunny
It's
Massachusetts?
spring-like. It's going to be up, over 20 centigrade in your vernacular, nice. And the sun is out, and
nice.
Definitely feeling like spring.
Nice. We are, as I speak currently. There's blue sky. Give it 5 minutes.
Really?
It's raining in a minute. We're having one of those days where it rains and then it's sunny, and but we're preparing for a long Easter weekend here. So
yes, yeah.
So we have a four day weekend, which you never have in the US, do you? There's
never. Yeah. Three's the max.
A 4-day holiday for you guys is like a summer holiday.
Thanksgiving can be a 4-day holiday for some people, not for everybody, but not if you're in the retail business.
Yeah, or a turkey.
Or a turkey.
All right. I did say we've got a lot to. Before I hit record, I did say we've got rather a lot to cover today.
So,
when I started rambling on about turkeys.
Yeah.
Let's go. So this week, last couple of weeks, we've been talking about QBRs. Then we went down a little bit more depth into your 5 principles of how to develop those OKRs. Right? So,
yes.
OKRs, yes. So we talked about, and basically, I mean, we're using the vernacular of OKRs, objectives and key results, but really this could be just your goals and metrics, couldn't it?
Absolutely.
The same sort of processes apply, right?
All the principles apply.
Yeah, so you decide 5 principles. That was address business questions, prioritize measures of impact, address readiness to make those impacts. Every measure needs a target, and I pause there for a moment as I think of the song "Every Rose Needs a Thorn" for some reason. And then is Rockstar CMO after all. And then expect to revisit all of these principles, which is pretty much our 5th of anything, isn't it? Oh, by the way, they were obviously 5 effing principles for those paying attention at home. So we've got those. So we've got to assume that we've developed our OKRs. And then I think this week, what we promised the listener was that we would come up with what the next steps would be, which is to create your executive dashboard.
Correct.
And I love the way you've described this. You've described this as selling your story of success in 6 steps. So
yes.
What say you, Jeff?
Well, admittedly, this is the operational side of reporting. So, but it is
Are you suggesting people skip past the next 20 minutes?
No, but it is essential, I think, for the CMO to know how, the reports are being built, to, work with their marketing ops or their analytics team, to get it right. And because the one thing is you want to feel confident when you're going in front of the executive team. You want to be confident in what you're saying, the story you're telling, what the underlying data is, because you will be scrutinized. So it's very important to take this seriously. And I know we've worked for some CMOs who have taken this seriously.
Yes, and I like that. You will be scrutinized. There isn't something so true right now in the world of marketing and senior marketing.
Absolutely.
You will be scrutinized. So we're selling your story of success in 6 steps, which is lovely iteration, even if it isn't 5 things,
yes,
which is I'm disappointed by, obviously. But
when I went to 6, I had to go for the S's.
Yeah. And there are 5 S's. Selling your story of success in 6 steps. Nicely done.
5.
All right, so what's your first step in selling yours? And by the way, I really like the way that you're framing this. The idea that your executive dashboard is selling your story of success.
Yep.
I mean, I want to underline that because I think that's a great idea.
Yes.
And that we are telling a story. So what's the first step in telling the story?
And if you're not successful yet, you're selling your story about how you're going to get there. So first step is to create a storyboard. And, because I think the CMO should think of this, dashboard as a canvas. And so, whether you're using, a business intelligence tool, analytics, you're just putting it on PowerPoint, you need to think about what the summary page is and what the story it's telling. And, you will, there's likely going to be a need to drill down on some things, but, you don't want to throw all the data up at people at once.
No.
So, take a slide, PowerPoint slide, or take a whiteboard and kind of block out the 5, 6 big goals. Determine, what the priority is as somebody's going to be scanning the dashboard. This is kind of like, this is where you bring your, someone from your creative team, like a graphic artist, in to just say, I don't want you to design this for me. I just want you to tell me, if I put this information up, how are people going to be looking at it? And so that you make sure that the priority stuff is front and center or top and left or whatever. And then as you've laid out these 4 to 6 goals, then, plug in the business questions. And going back to one of our principles that you need to understand what are the execs going to be asking, what's on their mind. And so then plug those things in so that, as you're building the dashboard, you're addressing those particular business questions.
It's great. And that's a great way to have the conversation. You asked and we answered kind of thing. You asked for this, and therefore we're delivering against this. So it's always relevant, isn't it, to what it is that they care about, which was the big takeaway from last week, wasn't it? Is what they care about. So that's the first thing. So we're creating this storyboard. We're thinking about the story we want to tell and how we're going to tell it. What's the second one?
Well, is to create a requirements document, like a dashboard requirements doc, so that you can start tracking. It's like you figured out basically what the storyboard is going to look like. Now you need to say, what's the detail behind this? And so every report that you create, and this is maybe more important for the ops team to say, okay, everything you create, you want to have a document that says, here's what's behind it, and note, who's the audience that we're in front of. There might be multiple opportunities to report. So is there one for an executive team meeting? Is there one for QBR? Is there one that we use pipeline reviews? So you may have various versions of this particular executive level dashboard. determine what the cadence of reporting is. And again, at the highest level for what you're trying to document, you want to capture these things so that, again, you're just reminding yourself what's the purpose of this particular dashboard and who am I presenting it to.
Yeah, and that's probably important for us and for them, because I think sometimes if you've got access to data, you kind of want to show it. It's like, oh, this is cool. I've got this new tool, or I've got access to this particular, and it's going up and to the right. Why didn't I bung that in as well?
And sometimes there's certainly executive teams that they're asking for all the details. Show me, so you want to push back on that as much as possible. And it may be that you need to have some details, but let's first be able to show them what the high level story is.
Yeah, and if we go back to the first one, when you're saying about creating the storyboard, I like the idea that you're saying, like, there's that first panel which just shows the high level. This is what you asked for. Here's the high level detail. But presumably, then that part of that design, you're almost designing a product, which is then if they click down here, then we get into this and we get into this, and that's the idea here. Okay, so we've created our storyboard. We've created our requirements for what we want to have in that document, right? And the audience, and how often we're going to report, and who, and how often we're going to. That's what I just said. How often we're going to report. What's the third one? I'm glad.
So the third one is to document the metrics, and so and this is within that requirements document. You want to lay out. Okay, so what's the business question we're addressing? What's the list of metrics? There may be multiples. If the question's about demand, you may have multiple things that you want to be able to display about that. And then, create a written definition of what it is. What are the units that we're going to be expressing this in? Is it currency? Is it percentages? Is it, leads? Is it opportunities by numbers? What's the target? Noting, we're going to report on a number that's comparison to something, which could be a benchmark. Again, it could be, X percent over last year. And then you want to be clear on what's the scope of the measure or the metric. Is it a regional? Is it country? Is it global? Is it, and, again, just for making sure you got your bases covered, and what is the cadence at which this gets updated, particularly when you get into, I guess for almost every metric, but certainly if you're pulling things from Google Analytics, that's kind of you can get it on real time, but if it's from your CRM and you're trying to get opportunity and pipeline information, then that might be, you might want to do it on a monthly basis, and so you're just trying to note what is the cadence of updating this, so that, again, you're trying to, the main reason for laying all this information out is that if you have to go back and change anything, then it's good to know, what was our concept when we first created this? And so if I need to go back and change something, like I need to go not just at a regional level, but I need to get down to a country level, at least I have this documented, and I can keep a little audit trail as this thing evolves.
Yeah, and I think, and so when we've created our storyboard, we know the requirements we want to put in there, and then this is where I got confused. I got a bit caught up with this, is document the metrics, because we should have already done that using your previous model, right? So we already knew what it was we were going to measure, what our OKRs are, but this is going down to that level of detail, isn't it?
Yep.
That's actually going to go into the dashboard, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then your fourth is...
pregnant pause, is to determine the data source. And I mean, this relates to documenting the metrics, but I think it's particularly important to pull out, because you want to know where the information is available and most accurate. And so there's a number of reasons for doing this. One, again, is for, if things are evolving and you need to have this audit trail so you know what your original concept was. But there may be issues with accessing the data or ensuring the accuracy. So, did we pull data from the CRM system, but we had to do a certain amount of massaging to, pull out some old or false data? Are there other metrics that this is dependent upon or supporting? So it's like if I reported that marketing contributed 10 million to the pipeline, but other pipeline reports only show 15 million in total pipeline, and people will say, "Oh, did marketing really source 66%, 2/3 of the pipeline?" So knowing, and this, what's like probably most important here is that you're saying people are looking at data from other sources, and you want to make sure you've got alignment with those other sources. So if in the pipeline review of a sales team, and you're showing marketing information at the executive team, there are people going to be in both of those meetings, and if things don't jive, you've got to make sure how to address it. Well, whether they're not supposed to jive or not, got to make sure what your story is there.
Well, plus we're going to make decisions based on those returns, right? And if you're saying, "Oh, marketing is actually," and we're always a bit suspicious of attribution anyway, aren't we? But let's say, marketing we're attributing 66% of revenue against our pipeline, and we're spending X on marketing.
Yep.
Therefore, if we spend X plus on marketing, then presumably they can contribute this.
Yeah.
And then you could fall woefully behind. But I also think this point here you've got about determining the data source is related to your previous point, really, about that cadence of updating, because one of the things I've discovered with reporting is sometimes there's is the juice worth the squeeze kind of thing? The level of effort that sometimes has to go into some of these things, particularly if you determine the data source. And you think, well, this is quite an easy metric for me, but maybe your systems aren't set up properly, or, and it actually requires somebody to spend half a day on a spreadsheet getting this information to you. Yeah. And you asking for that every week is going to piss them off, right? They really don't have that kind of time. So, sales teams often get wrapped up in having to do onerous reporting, don't they, to various bits and bobs in their business.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They've got the CFO coming to them, they've got the head of marketing coming to them, they've got the head of sales coming to them, and it drives them nuts, doesn't it? So determining that data source, and I also think as part of that is, what is the level of effort to actually get this data out?
And this is, what's important in this particular exercise we're kind of going through vis-a-vis our last discussion is you may have determined the metrics, and it may be, maybe you've got new analytics tools coming on, et cetera. It may be 6 months before you actually can get to that data that you signed up to report on in the first place. So again, let's document it. Let's see where we are. Let's actually, maybe we have some data we can give in the interim before we can actually get to that more accurate set of data.
Well, and the other thing about metrics, it's one of those activities amongst the team that has to create collaboration, doesn't it? You have to be talking to various different bits of the business, finance, sales and stuff in order to build this, right? So it's a great way for you as a marketer to be wandering around the business, asking questions and understand, particularly when you're talking about the provenance and source of data, right? Is it, all right, so you've told me that 5 deals came from this particular event. Well, let's go a little bit downstream and find out what really happened there.
Yep.
Because attribution is such a beast. And it's funny, Robert Rose has got a great story about attribution where he talks about an organization that started marketing from scratch, from nothing, and weren't doing anything and did all the things. And then their sales went up hugely. But when they analysed which one of the things was contributing, if everything had contributed the way that it reported, they'd have been, their performance would have been even higher. So you can't always...
Everybody's claiming credit for that one.
Yeah, so I really like what you were saying there about the fact that, if you're showing that the marketing source is 10 million in pipeline because you're using a certain data source, but somebody else saying, oh, no, it's 15, then we all look silly, don't we? Because marketing needs to build that reputation for that.
Absolutely.
And that stuff. Yeah. So they're the first 4. So we create a storyboard, we've created a dashboard. It's me doing my wandering around the wrestling ring with a big sign again, if anyone remembers last week. Documenting the metrics. We've then determined the data source and we've gone hard into that. And I think you should look at the level of effort for each of those data sources. So what's your 5th?
And here in round 5, ding, ding, ding. Socialize your draft. So build, a mock-up of the dashboard. And again, using whatever tool you've got, whether it's again PowerPoint or whether you're using an analytics tool, and talk to members of your audience, your executive audience, and say, is this legible? Is it scannable? Does it answer your questions? Does it tell you the story and what you want to be getting the feedback is like, is this telling the story that I want to tell? And where do we need to drill down to provide, more detail? Again, that we want to do off the main page of the dashboard. This is good practice, and whether you can build it in the analytics tool or, mock it up visually. This is, again, what depends on, the skills and time that you got on your staff. But I think this is a really important step in any kind of reporting, is to make sure that before you go into the big meeting, you've assembled something that's going to work for the audience.
Yeah, and I think that B and C is really important in this. Is, does it answer their questions? Because I've seen situations where you create the report and you share the report, and they go, actually, I know. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't quite deliver what they wanted. Either it's too detailed, or it doesn't quite, it's not detailed enough, or anything like that, right? So I think that's really important. Or it helps them reframe their question, where they're like, oh, I see what you did there. No, that's not really what I meant. You don't need to do all that shit. I just need this, right? So
this is like showing the ad or the piece of collateral, and they go, well, that's, I know that's what I told you, but that's not really. That's not really what I meant.
Which is the world of marketing, isn't it? Really?
It is.
All right, so we get to our sixth. I won't say effing, but I can't, can I? It's our sixth success step.
Sixth syncopated step. Report, rinse, and repeat. So I got another alliteration, 3 R's in the six sixes. So obviously, once you've gone through the process, now you're ready to actually deliver the report. You're going to get feedback. So as much as you've tried to, do all of the due diligence ahead of time and try to pre-flight it, at some point you're going to be asked to make changes, and the business is going to change. So it's like mid-year, all of a sudden marketing's got a new goal to throw on the dashboard. So you got to be ready for that, and you go back to your storyboard and your requirements doc, and you start moving things around, and see how you can change it, and show that you are an agile, responsible, accountable market, which is, I think, some of the things we were talking about at the very beginning of the series. You want to show marketing is accountable, measurable, and all that.
All that, yeah. And the other thing is, I think this is just our standard boilerplate for any advice we give, isn't it? Just be prepared to change.
Yeah. It's the only constant. Somebody said.
All right. So that's so we've done the weather. We've done our we've given our marketing advice. Our third agenda item is what song are we going for this week, Jeff?
We're going to go to one of our favorites from back a few decades ago. Blondie from 1978, I actually was unaware Blondie had, the whole band had quite a career in the underground before they hit stardom, and then they continued for a while. But anyway, picture this, in which Debbie Harry says, "All I want is 20/20 vision, a total portrait with no omissions." I think that sums it up in a nutshell.
I love that, yeah. And Blondie, I love that we've got Blondie on, and I know she's from the late 70s, early 80s, and it's from my childhood. But
yes,
that is.
We'll find a topic that we can match to Call on Me or Tide is High or something like that.
You can't fail with a bit of Blondie. So I'm going to play out with Picture This by Blondie from 1978. And Jeff, will you be in the marketing studio next week?
I will.
I'm looking forward to it, mate. I'll see you then.
See you then. Cheers.
All I want is 20/20 vision, a total portrait with no omissions. All I want is a vision of you. Oh, if you can picture this, a day in December. Picture this, freezing cold weather. You got clouds on your lids and you'd be on the skiers if it weren't for your job.
Thank you, Jeff. That was a little snippet of Picture This by Blondie from 1979. And Jeff is publishing all of these tips on our blog at rockstarcmo.com. Right, time to go backstage with my guest. Courtney Lindau is the head of practice for web analytics and business intelligence at Nimble Gravity. The team at Nimble Gravity loves solving hard problems and believe the right data can transform and propel growth for any organization. They work with companies ranging in size from startups to those with billions in revenue across varied industries such as endangered species protection, healthcare, DTC clothing, and many more. As you'll hear, Courtney's expertise is in helping those companies track the right KPIs for their business in order to uncover actionable insights and tell a story from the data with a strong strategic focus on the use of web analytics. It was fun hanging out with Courtney. Hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Courtney, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm great. So excited to be here, Ian.
No, it's great to have you. Thank you very much. And where are we speaking to you from?
I am based in Denver, Colorado. So kind of looking out my window at some melting snow and eager to get into the mountains this weekend.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And what I like there is you immediately answered my first question, which is always about the weather because I'm English and we're obsessed with it. So you've got melting snow. So that's fantastic. So for folks, I mean, it's really been nice to get to know you a little bit, Courtney. For folks that haven't had that opportunity, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I am a marketing analyst, a web analyst. I have been working in the web analytics space for about 10 years now. Mm-hmm. And I love everything about the storytelling with data. So I get really enthusiastic about getting to work with different clients of all different sizes of businesses, different types of websites, and getting to understand how users are interacting with their sites, what they're doing, how we can track their data in a way that's interesting, actionable, and really helps those businesses understand what's going on their website.
Yeah, cool. Well, we'll dive into that in a bit because I'm going to ask you about some specific tools that we should be using and all that kind of stuff. But you're currently with Nimble Gravity. Tell us about your agency and what you guys do.
Yeah, so Nimble Gravity is a data science, e-commerce, strategy, and global engineering consultancy. But at the core, we're really focused on the power of data. So everything we do really comes down to tracking interesting data, utilizing data science to help companies understand things that they didn't think that they would be capable of understanding. And on my side, I am the partner leading the web analytics practice. So I'm always focused on that website side of how do we track data for clients that's unique to their business and tells more than what you get out of just the basics, your basic sessions and revenue. What else can we capture? What else can we do to tell stories, understand what's going on? Nimble Gravity is actually growing pretty rapidly. We have employees in US, Mexico, Argentina, and now Colombia as well. So it's been super cool to expand and meet people in a lot of different places too. So
and I love that. I mean, we as marketers have never had it so good in terms of data, right? But what we're short of is insight from that data. So I think it's interesting that you guys provide that guide for us to, what's the important stuff here, which is what we'll get into a little bit in our conversation. So I know that and then just back to you. I flipped the questions there from the notes that I sent you. So what and what I ask all of my guests is what actually inspired you to get into marketing? What to choose this career? I mean, you've had a great career so far. I like where you are, but what inspired you in the beginning?
Yeah, I love this question. I was always super interested and have always been super interested in psychology and why people do what they do. And why we're these weird, irrational beings that do goofy things that we didn't expect that we would do. And when I went to college, I went to CU Boulder, and I kind of started in general business. I'm like, I'll do something in business that'll be interesting, right? And then in my first marketing class, absolutely fell in love. And we found it so fascinating. You learn like the 4 Ps and all the basics. Through my college career, I was like, where am I going to go? Okay, I want to do marketing. Cool. That's super broad. I don't know what that means. Like, I interned for sports marketing at the soccer club here in Colorado and loved that. Thought I might go into sports marketing. And then my senior year, like last semester, I took this digital marketing class, and it was really the first time that digital marketing had a class. It was just a small elective, and it was very basic. It's like, what is paid search? What is affiliate marketing? What's email? All the super basics. And there was a portion about web analytics where we got to touch on Google Analytics, and it was back when it was Google Analytics Classic before Universal. And I just fell in love with the data side and how I could connect all the other channels in the web analytics and see not just an email or just SEO, just paid search, but make that connection between what you're doing on SEO and what you're doing on paid search to get the whole search infrastructure of how people are using it. So from there, I actually had an awesome teacher for that class who knew everyone in Denver. And so she connected me with the first boutique agency that I worked at, where I got to go start my web analytics career. And it was just so much fun from there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love your passion for this and the idea of falling in love. And one of the things I think is interesting when we talk about marketing education on the show, that there's like different points of view on this, in that a lot of marketers like myself are self-taught, right? You can see the books behind me. I know everybody else can't because I'm not recording video, but I'm a self-taught marketer. A lot of the people I speak to are, and there's different opinions about how good marketing education can be. So it sounds like you had a pretty good go there, didn't you? But some of it was a little bit basic, like you say. I think it's hard sometimes, isn't it, for these education facilities to stay up to date? Was that your experience when you came out? You had to like get your own skills, or what would you say?
Oh yeah, it was super basic. I mean, it was very much just in everything with marketing. All the classes I took were very much here, let me tell you the words you need to know so that you can go learn more about them elsewhere.
Right.
Like, here's the key terms that you should look out for when you're doing research to learn what you actually need to know.
Right.
And that was very much the case. And the digital side too was just like, here's what paid search is. Go figure it out.
So really they were teaching you how to Google search.
Oh yeah. So much of my career has been Google searching, and
in the future it'll be teaching prompts for ChatGPT, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah. So absolutely.
So I already asked you about Nimble Gravity, but before that, and I found this fascinating, you were with Arrow Electronics, and I'm a fan of content marketing. So the way I know Arrow Electronics is through Robert Rose, who's also on the show, who for Content Marketing Institute always talks about them, in that they bought a series of media properties, and they're an organization that's taken content marketing very seriously. And what I was interested in is, what was your experience when you were with Arrow from your data side? Did you see the impact of that? I mean, we talk about content marketing and, in a kind of soft way, but it performs, doesn't it? And I wonder what you saw from that.
Yeah, Arrow Electronics is so interesting with how many different aspects you have in the business. Like, you have the core business, which is, really working with the big, massive sales. And then I worked in the e-commerce business, looking at arrow.com, and then working more closely with the content marketing side. And it was really fascinating with the types of products they're selling with electronics components, how long it would take for someone to actually go from discovering Arrow online. Maybe they're a tinkerer and they just want to build some interesting tech product for themselves.
Yeah.
Or they're like a big organization and they're trying to build a car or something. From all cases, there was this really long journey from when they found Arrow to when they would finally purchase, or when they're starting to build their BOM, their bill of materials, to when they actually hit the buy button.
Yeah.
And the content marketing space was so valuable to have that kind of immediate connection so people could go do their research.
Yeah.
Because there's so many amazing companies out there that have the right parts that like do all the things you need them to do. But the companies that are making those parts don't always have the best capabilities of explaining why you should pick that part versus another part, or why you need that part.
Yeah.
And the content marketing organization and all of those different media companies were so valuable in making that connection of how do we get the right information to someone who needs to understand how to use this component or how to choose a component? And we found a lot of times we would get, from an e-commerce perspective, a lot of referrals back and forth. So people from like an EE Times going to arrow.com after they've done some research, go click around, try to see if they can find the part they read about. And then vice versa, going back from arrow.com over back to EE Times, because I'm like, well, wait, I missed that. Let's go back over there. And it was just really cool to see how much content played into a journey that is so, you're just thinking electronic components. They're just going to go click and buy the components they need to build a computer. But there's just so much more research. So.
No, I love that. And we all know, I mean, I'm in B2B, so I know that there's a huge amount of research that goes on before anybody comes and contacts you. And if you can provide that research, then they're in your goldfish bowl, right? And I recently wrote an article about the funnel isn't really a funnel. It's just a big bucket with a spout on the bottom, isn't it? And you want to keep as many people in that bucket as you can. Your content does that. So I was really interested. Thank you for sharing that about Arrow. But we better get to your primary reason, well, not reason for being here, but your primary skill and the things I want to ask you about. So we talk a lot about metrics on the show, right? But from your client experience, where do you think organizations should start? What are the simple things that companies need to do to improve around web analytics and reporting, your core skill? I mean, what's the first thing you generally find yourself talking to clients about?
The most important thing is making sure your data is accurate, because you can't make decisions on crappy data. Like, you just don't want to be making the wrong decision because you're accidentally double counting everything on your site and thinking you're doing better than you are. Or the opposite, not counting things that you should be getting credit for. So we always like to start at Nimble Gravity with an audit. But even for anyone just looking in their data, it's asking those questions of, does this data point make sense? So if you're used to seeing 100 transactions in your POS data, you should be pretty close to 100 transactions in your web analytics data. Oftentimes with VPNs and private browsers, you don't see the 100% match, but you should be still pretty close to the point where, yes, okay, this makes sense. This is what I kind of expect to see here. And a lot of times we find that businesses just don't even know to start with that. So I think that's really the basis to start with. Okay, does this make sense? If it doesn't, having to go a little bit under the hood to understand where something's gone wrong. That's where, of course, Nimble Gravity can help. But essentially, getting that tracking right is going to be really key. And then if you're at a place where, okay, yes, my data looks accurate. Next, the thing is tracking data points that are really unique to your business that will help you make the better decisions. So, of course, everyone wants better conversion rate on e-commerce, but just tracking sessions and transactions isn't going to help you if your conversion rate drops or it goes way up. You need to help understand why those things happened and all the metrics that get you to the why. So we have a client that's in pet insurance. So they are selling pet insurance for, maybe you have multiple pets, maybe you have one pet, but for them, a conversion rate, they need to understand, did people drop off because it was a pricing issue? Did they drop off because they didn't have enough information about what the insurance covered? Was it because they have a really old dog and now they're realizing maybe it's not worth the high cost, or they have a puppy and they're like, I don't know what to do. I have a brand new puppy and I don't know if I need insurance. And all of that is those types of questions that would help answer the why of maybe why their conversion rate went up really high or decreased. So getting those, go ahead.
One thing I was going to ask about Nimble Gravity, is that the kind of customer you normally have? Is it B2C? Is that where you tend to work?
We have everything. We have such an interesting client base. So definitely both B2B and B2C. We have clients that are your typical e-commerce, like apparel, or we have a pet food company. We've worked with, those types of typical e-commerce. We've worked with SaaS companies where it's more just trying to get lead gen. Then we've worked B2B companies. We've worked with other electronic components companies.
Wow. Yeah.
And then my favorite, most interesting client is actually in death tech or like funeral home tech. And
Wow.
essentially it's a funeral home website builder. And
Wow.
that side, you're kind of both B2B and B2C, where the technology is being sold to funeral homes, but then you're also helping with improving their obituary components of the website so that you can get a better user experience for the people who are going to read the obituaries of their loved ones. So really interesting client base.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So we were talking just now about where organizations should start. So it sounds like you need to do an audit. You need to correlate that you're measuring the right things and they actually fit the other things that are happening in the business. So you can see that if there's any wild discrepancies and stuff. When you were saying about an audit, what do you mean by an audit? What do you tend to start off with when you're looking at somebody's website analytics?
That is a great question. We usually will start with the tagging. So if they're using Google Tag Manager, if they're on Google Analytics, or if they're on Adobe or something else, we'll look at whatever their tag management system is. And we start with looking at those tags. Do those tags firing rules make sense? Just checking from the very basics. Are they firing on page views when we expect them to fire on page views? Do we have duplicate tracking anywhere? And then we go through kind of all of our known best practices for their web analytics tool. My mindset's always kind of with GA4 and making sure as everything's changing rapidly with GA4, they're constantly releasing new things, that whatever the latest release is getting incorporated into their data. And then if they're moving to GA4 from Universal, do we have those same components from Universal as the basis for GA4 so that we're getting clean data across?
Well, you move straight on to a topic that I know that I wanted to cover with you for sure, because I'm completely guilty of this. I'm clinging on to UA for all I'm worth, right? Because I open up GA4 and I think this is very different. So what are you seeing with GA4? There's a lot of discussion right now about GA4, and it's going to come whether we like it or not. Do you like it for a start? Do you think it's an improvement?
I have very much excitement about GA4.
Yeah.
I'm at the phase 2 where I'm doing a lot of migrations, but I haven't had the chance to get like my hands as dirty as I want to, the way I'm used to in Universal Analytics. But the thing I love most about the GA4 platform is it's forcing people to be more mindful of how they report on their data. We definitely got lucky with Universal that it had everything where you could go pull a custom report. And the good part of that is like anyone could go into any Google Analytics and it all looks the same. The bad portion of that was that you ended up having to go pull the same type of report that took 3 filters and a segment, and you had to drill down in 3 places to get to the data point that you needed every time you wanted to pull it. So it was really slow, and you had to know what all of those little levers were to get to the data you cared about. And in GA4, there's a lot of opportunity for customization. So any of the dashboards have like their little, dashboard icons, like their items within the dashboards that are all customizable. So you can make those dashboards what you want to see immediately when you go in, instead of having to go like filter 3 times to go get to that information. And then the explorations are really great too, because those custom reports you used to create by filtering a bunch in UA now can just be things that you go click on under explorations. And I really like that from the perspective of, if I'm asking the same questions about my business every day, I don't want to have to spend 20 minutes filtering down and waiting for the Google loading bar. And just sit there waiting for my data to populate. I just want to go click on one thing and get to the data I like.
And I think a lot of us have been using UA by having Data Studio over the top to do that kind of thing, right? So it sounds like it would cut out some of that if we can have fairly high level dashboard that you can go to. And so I like that. I like that vote of confidence in GA4. That sounds good. I think we can all feel a bit more positive about that. So yeah. I'm just conscious of the time now. I'm going to move on to our final question. We have a regular feature, the Rockstar CMO Swimming Pool, where we throw all the bullshit snake on overhyped trends that plague this industry we love. Yes, that's correct. I said that right. So like our portal to marketing hell. What would you chuck in there?
I would chuck tracking every single data point, even if I'm never going to use it.
I like that one.
That's one we see all the time where clients are like, well, I just want to track every possible thing. I want like hovers on everything and clicks on everything. And it gets to be such a mess, and it becomes like a swimming pool of crap that people have to sort through. And that's why I think it's like the perfect thing to toss, because it doesn't help get to the pinpoint data, because now you have more data junk to sort through to find those gems instead of just tracking the gems from the start.
It's like where we started with that conversation about analytics, wasn't it? That we as marketers have all this data and we collect it like magpies, but we have little insight. And that's the reason, isn't it? Because we've got all this junk in our swimming pool. I like that. And you brought swimming pool into it. Great. And so it's been great chatting to you. I could have carried on talking about metrics for a lot longer. So I'm going to definitely have to have you back on the show, particularly to learn a bit more about GA4, because I definitely need that education. But if people are looking for a bit of education on these things and they spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you and your agency?
Yes, so you can find us at nimblegravity.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Courtney Lindau. My last name's Lindau. I'm very easy to find. I'm the only one.
Splendid. And I'll include all your links in the show notes. It's been a pleasure to meet you and have you on the show. And a really good topic. I love this topic. So we definitely have to have you back. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast, Ian.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Courtney. Quite a theme of measurement in this week's show. And I don't know if you've dug into GA4, but it was good to chat with an expert. And if you want to connect with Courtney, I will, of course, include all of her links in the show notes. Right, it's time to wind down in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar and join my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, for a cocktail and a marketing thought. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend, and welcome to the bar.
Thank you.
It is a wonderful time to be here. We are now in April. It's all going to be spring. From what I understand, the sun has actually made its annual appearance for London, so this is a good thing. And I have a wonderful cocktail for us this evening, and it's all to celebrate, which we should all be celebrating, Finland entering into NATO, which I think is really fun. So I thought it would be fun to do a Finnish drink, a Finnish cocktail. And yes, they do have them, and no, there are no fish in them. So this is a good thing. This is called the Finnish long drink that we have tonight. And basically what we have here is it's a kind of a highball type of drink. And you can do this with a number of different kinds of ingredients, right? So you can do this. Do you remember the soft drink Fresca?
Oh, so no, that might be an American thing.
I guess it is an American thing. So Fresca is very much of a sparkling sort of grapefruit tasting drink, but you can use red grapefruit juice for this as well. Basically, any grapefruit juice you can find. And as we've talked about many times, the least amount of sugar, the better.
Yes.
But basically, you have this grapefruit juice. Then you have, and I'm suspecting you'll have this in your desktop bar, a couple of shots of gin, right? So we'll start with gin. Then we'll do a little bit of lemon juice, a little bit of club soda if you didn't use something like Fresca, so just to give it a few bubbles, and then a little bit of a grapefruit for garnish. So it's like a grapefruit gin lemon. It's very refreshing, and the reason I picked it, one was of course for Finland, joining up with NATO and the rest of the wonderful world here, but also because it is spring, and here in Southern California anyway, it's spring has sprung. It's warm, it's sunny. It's definitely the time to get outside and have something refreshing.
Yeah, well, it's a long weekend here, so we've got Easter weekend, so it's a holiday today when we're recording it on Friday, and we've got holiday Monday, and the sun is shining. It's 6:30 in the evening, and the sun is still shining here where I live. Amazing. And the yes, but that sounds delicious. So I shall attempt to make it with only the ingredients of my desktop oil. By the way, listening to your show, I understand that Joe has made a trip to London, doesn't he, this week? So
I believe he is there as we speak, or coming home today, or something. like that.
If he's coming home today, that's a shame, because I was thinking he picked the right week. Anyway, that's obviously Joe Polizzi, who's on your show, This Whole Marketing. Did you put ice in that drink?
Yes, indeed. A typical highball, like sort of a tall, thin glass with a lot of ice. It's
nice.
Think of it like a summer drink.
Got it. And I am going to kick this off with, as you say, I'm going to go with some gin. And
that's
and
good.
It's actually,
well, we actually picked something that you have.
Have, yes, obviously. So, and you said a couple of shots of that in there.
As much as you possibly can.
You know me too well, sir. You know me too well. And obviously, the most English of grapefruits, we both know is the cucumber. So I'm going to put in some Fever Tree. Why do I keep saying their brand name? They don't sponsor this show.
They should, though.
They should. Cucumber tonic water. But I love the sound of gin and grapefruit. I've never tried that before. I'm a gin and lime guy. Sometimes.
Yes. Well, the grapefruit is lovely.
Yeah, I bet it is. I'm going to give this a try. That is delicious, Robert. And it's very refreshing. And I could drink one of these every week. What are we calling that?
We call it the Finnish long drink, although from what I understand from the history, there is an actual Finnish name called the Lonkero.
Oh, okay.
I have no idea if the Finnish pronounce it that way. There's not a lot I can pronounce in Finnish, so just it's a very unique language, that is for sure. But yes, that is the name of it.
Yes, I'm very. I've been to Finland a number of times, and I'm very fortunate they speak.
I've never
English.
been. I really want to go.
Yeah, I was lucky. A few years ago, I was working with a vendor, and we did. I was on a bit of a speaking tour with them, and we did all the Nordic countries. It was very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, very nice.
All right. So when we're in this bar, and we're having these lovely cocktails, and conversation inevitably with us, Robert, inevitably turns to marketing. What are we talking about this week?
We're going to talk about the most exciting thing on the planet, which is process. I want to talk about governance, said nobody ever. But we are going to talk about this because it's a perfect topic for sitting in Finland and talking about it. But here's the thing. The number one word that I hear when I talk to marketing practitioners over what is missing, right? What is missing from the organization's marketing and content operations? Yeah. And that one word is visibility, right? And it seems to come up in almost every client that we work on. And basically, if you think about it for a second, right? If you think about, okay, how do ideas get turned into marketing messages or integrated into content assets? Basically, how do ideas come to life into content? And for most businesses, the process is usually going to start with a small team or even maybe one person. And then somebody sets a sort of superset of overall themes or campaigns, or then those priorities sort of get inserted into the edges of the organization for campaigns that make their way out into content, into all the different channels. And at least that's the way it's supposed to work. And spoiler alert, it doesn't. It never works that way. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that, so ideas are invisible until they become content, right? And what I find is that businesses often fall into this content strategy trap where, and I've said this before, right, where content is kind of everybody's job, but nobody's strategy. And the interesting thing is that we start to put in workflow. And so the problem with workflow and process is if you do it where it's very slow or very strict or very, step by step by step, well, then what happens is it really slows things down, and it then encourages those people at the edges of the organization, like sales teams or regional offices or customer service reps or PR and comms, basically people that are really in charge of putting messaging in front of customers. Well, they'll seek a different solution because things just move too slowly, right? So they end up routing around the institution and sort of creating their own content based on what they think the main messages should be. And there's this push-pull battle that starts to ensue with basically all of the sort of higher-ups or senior leadership or brand marketing or whatever it is that's setting those messages, and the sort of edges of the organization. The edges are trying to just quote-unquote get stuff done, but the content leaders see them as going rogue and not doing things, and it starts to be a fight. In contrast, however, if you're too lax about it and you sort of say, let everybody sort of do their own thing, well, then everybody starts patching things together and you end up with sort of a patchwork quilt of messaging and stories and content that doesn't really work either. Basically, all practitioners in this case, up and down that line, that process line, have no visibility into what's coming, right? If it's too slow, it's because, quite honestly, they can't see up the food chain far enough, the supply chain. Or if it's too fast, there is no visibility because it's too foggy because there's too much noise. There's too many things in the air. And so when we start talking about, okay, let's balance this with the right workflow and the right process, what we see is a resistance, a real resistance to this. And it's usually for one of three fears. And it's this thing we've been calling the fear of collaboration, which is there is the fear of control, like I'm going to lose control. So, for example, worked with a tech firm, product marketing and engineering team. They set the message, very draconian. Basically, the team said, this is what we will talk about. And the content ideas made their way out to a content team, which, they sort of said, I don't like it. We don't like what's getting done here. So we'll engage our own agencies or analysts and we'll create our own stuff and sort of route it around that institution. And so everybody was at odds with one another and nothing got done, right? Basically, they didn't want a more collaborative process, the people who initiated it, because they wanted to control that messaging they didn't get it either. The second is that there's a fear of too much process, right? Where it's like, okay, we worked with one client, for example, and they were like, there's so much, we don't want more process. It's just going to slow things down. It feels too, like it's too collaborative and we just want streamlined. And it's like, no, they basically ensured there with no process that, yes, some of the stuff they were doing was amazing and some of it really was awful. And basically, because some of it is really awful, very distinct parts of their buyer's journey was like really bad because those places that they're making it up on their own are just bad and not really feeding anybody into the good stuff. And then the last one is this sort of fear of failure, right? Which is weird but true, where we're afraid that our colleagues are going to ruin our ideas or that we're going to ruin theirs. And so you end up sort of in this weird way. They don't want to collaborate because this is my little gem of an idea and I don't want to collaborate because somebody might ruin it. Or I don't think mine's good enough to, we'll just do it on our own so that we basically don't have to go get permission from anybody else because I don't want to
justify this.
And so the answer to all this stuff is visibility, right? It is, having, we often use the analogy of air traffic control. You've got to set up a situation where everybody knows where all the planes in the air are. And basically all the individual pieces of content. Before you can talk about who and where and what should control what, you've got to make sure everything is visible. And if nothing else happens, you'll definitely help the collaborative process by just knowing. It can still be messy, but as long as we know it's messy, then it's okay. But what gives you, sort of, because every content strategist in the audience right now, their eyes are twitching, right? In terms of what they're looking at in terms of the ability to, to create, consistent things. But just starting even at visibility gives you the ability to start looking at, okay, now here are the planes that we want to control. Now we can start balancing in where we do need stricter workflow. We do need stricter processes. We do need these kinds of things in place and where we don't, where we can actually let everybody be them.
Yeah, no, this is great, because all those things you just said, and I think that I think you might be referring to a company that I've worked with. No, all those things about that control of the idea, losing control of the idea, and or that somebody else will take credit for the idea, or that they'll, or it will get watered down, or I understand the audience, they don't. All that stuff, isn't
exactly.
it? Yeah. And I was also reminded of when I was working at McCann. There's actually somebody who had the role of traffic manager, is what they called themselves, right? And I think on this show, you've talked about having a showrunner, haven't you? That we need somebody who manages the story and how it's going to get put together and all that kind of good stuff.
That's right. Yeah, we usually call those people the arbiter of good. Who can, someone who can say, this is good, right? This is, this is, and good does not necessarily mean approved, right? It just, because a lot of times we get into this, well, it shouldn't be one person sort of setting everything. Well, there's an argument to be made for that it should, but even if it's not somebody who's necessarily approving something. It's someone who's establishing that this meets the standard. This meets the company or the brand standard for what good looks like. Yeah. Now we can debate whether it's appropriate or the timing or et cetera. But what we're not doing is debating whether it's good content or not.
I actually think it's quite good that somebody is going to have that thought within an organization, because too many times nowadays you're seeing, and this is where, AI generated content will get rid of this, is people just want to push stuff out, right? It doesn't really matter, if there is somebody in an organization that cares about the quality, then great, right?
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. At least they're having that conversation, so that must be rewarding. So what do you do when how did you resolve it when you're working with that client where you had like the product team saying, this is the way we need to talk about the product, you must go do that. You marketers are just the creative crayons department, you go write the things we've told you to do. And in the meantime, they went off to the agency and did their own thing. How did you reconcile that?
Well, the funny thing is to point out the irony, right? You put on your best, I know he's not the most beloved character in the world, but you sort of put on your Dr. Phil hat, right? And you go, how's that working out for you? How's all that, iron fist control working out for you? Because it's not usually, and it wasn't here for sure. And it's to say, listen, you don't necessarily, providing visibility doesn't necessarily mean giving up control. We think you should, because we think that there is a valid point of view that the edges of the organization, whether it's, again, PR and comms or the regional offices or your field marketing team or whoever it is that's actually talking with customers, there's a valid point of view there that you should be bringing back and including into your ideas that are going to turn into content. But having said that, at least giving them, visibility through a content calendar or through some sort of visible calendar or collaborative tool of some kind doesn't necessarily mean you have to give up control. What you're doing is like, you're just not keeping it secret from them, right? Because that's what you're ostensibly doing by keeping such a tight lid on it until it's fully baked and halfway through and the agencies are done and you've seen the assets and you've seen them all and they're ready to go into the field. You've ostensibly just kept it a secret from everybody until, quote unquote, you want it into the field. And then by showing it to them at that point, you're basically saying this is the way it is or not. And that sort of ultimatum isn't good.
Yeah, we've invested all this time and effort. And plus, at that point, you are so wedded to that idea and you love it so much that it's your child, isn't it? And
that's right.
All right. So I need to think how to segue into this. So if somebody's looking for your content children, where might they find those, Robert?
Well, they'll find it at our little website, which is contentadvisory.net.
I love it. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
Well, I'm back on Twitter.
Wow. Cool.
Although this may be short-lived because, man, has that place become sort of just awful. I was literally scrolling through my Twitter feed, the For You feed.
Yep.
And I counted of the first 20 posts, the first 20 tweets, 5 of them were ads.
Yeah.
7 of them were from people I don't follow, but are, either MAGA sort of, freedom fighters,
Yeah.
or hard left reactionaries, sort of the total political posts. And 5 of them were actually from people I followed.
Oh, that for you thing, I think they do that on purpose in order to try and get a reaction.
Of course they do. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
It's developed on purpose, right?
Yeah.
But where I used to never see an ad on Twitter, almost, it was so rare that I would see an ad on Twitter. And it was usually if I did a search or searched on a hashtag or something that I would see an ad or promoted post. But now it's like it's just chock-a-block full of ads, and the ads are completely irrelevant to anything I'm interested in.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll find you on LinkedIn then. But more
LinkedIn,
important,
yes, of course.
where we have none of that going on here, none of that MAGA stuff or anything like that. Here in the bar, will I see you in the bar?
You will indeed see it.
I look forward to it. I'll see you there. Thank you, Robert. We mentioned the podcast he does with Joe Polizzi there. It's called This Old Marketing, and this week's episode is particularly good. I recommend you give that a listen. So that's a wrap on episode 161 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thanks to Jeff, Courtney and Robert for sharing their insight, and to you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. Please let us know what you think. You can contact us through our website, rockstarcmo.com. Catch us on the socials. We are Rockstar CMO, or leave a rating or review in your favourite podcast app, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, Jeff will be back in the studio, Robert will be in the bar, and I will be going backstage with independent CRM consultant Adiola Sole. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you're going to join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.